Disability Insurance Generosity on Labour Market Participation by Olivier Marie and Judith Val-Castello, published in the Journal of Public Economics in 2012. So I'm going to follow basically the main sections of the paper. So start with an introduction, talk you through the disability insurance system in Spain, which has some kind of unusual features that the authors are able to exploit to get quite an interesting result. Look at the data they use, some descriptive statistics, talk you through the methodology they used, the results they found, and the conclusions that they drew. So following the sovereign debt crises of 2011-2012, when this paper was published, all forms of government expenditure came under really heavy scrutiny, and disability insurance was no exception. So the main criticisms of these programs is obviously not the cost, but the disincentive to work that they generate. So this makes them quite a big target for governments that need to cut costs, because they're one of the few revenue-boosting expenditure cuts that are available to them. So what the authors try to do is quantify the effect, because this was quite a big debate at the time. So obviously the effect is almost universally accepted to be negative, but the literature differs in how it deals with the endogeneity issue, and therefore the resulting magnitude of the effect. So the endogeneity issue is obviously that selection into disability insurance is driven by having an underlying low probability of employment as a result of health problems or disability. So using the particular methodology that they employ, they find that a 36% increase in disability insurance generosity leads to an 8% fall in employment, and then the resulting elasticity of DI generosity on labour market participation is 0.22. And this is driven exclusively by the income effect for reasons I'll explain now. So, the way the disability insurance system works in Spain is that it's contributory. So following a disabling accident, you're assessed as having one of three types of disability. And then your benefit is a monthly portion of your previous salary. So the three types are partial disability, which is defined as being unable to perform your usual job, but that you can perform another job. Full disability is that you're unable to perform any kind of job. And total disability is that you need third-party assistance to kind of complete day-to-day tasks, like washing and eating. So these are the number of people, the portion, that fall into each bucket. And these are the replacement rates of your previous salary. So they have periodic assessments, depending on your condition, to assess whether you've got better or worse. But in practice, the revisions are really rare. So once you're in the system and you've been assigned a category, you tend to stay there until you either die or you reach 65, and then it's converted to retirement benefits. So the one kind of interesting feature of this system is that it's not forbidden to work. So even though some of these definitions would seem to preclude it, it's not explicitly prohibited from working. And the level of benefit is not income dependent, so it doesn't taper off with salary, which means that there's no distortionary substitution effects in the system. So once you reach 55, if you are partially disabled, so there's two rates that we saw earlier, 55% or 75%. So once you reach 55, if you're on 55%, you are able to apply for an increase to the higher rate. The policy wording grants it to those whose lack of preparation and education and the social and labour market conditions of which they live make it difficult for them to find a job. So there's no data on who applies and is accepted or rejected, but when they interviewed people who do these assessments, they told them that they give the increase to anyone indiscriminately over the age threshold who applies for it. So kind of micro one would tell us that everyone applies for the extra free money, but actually they don't. So the data shows that only 60% of those who are over the age threshold receive the higher rate. So that implies there's quite a lot of self-selection effects. Well, it either implies that the agents aren't telling the truth, that they do check who deserves it or not, but the authors believe them when they say that it's given to anyone who applies for it. So it means that there's some self-selection effects, which are probably correlated with the underlying probability of finding a job, so things like confidence, for example. But it's not a problem for the regression that they've designed, as long as these unobservable characteristics are distributed randomly above and below age 55. So the data they use is from the administrative records of the Spanish social security system. They have a random sample of 1 million individuals who contributed to or benefited from it at some point in 2007. What they take as their sample is everyone aged 51 to 58 who receives partial disability benefits at some point between 1996 or 2007. So each observation is 1 month for one person, and they end up with over 600,000 monthly observations for nearly 15,000 individuals. They divide the sample into those who are above and below age 55, and then they further restrict it to those who started claiming before age 55 for reasons I'll explain later. So the dependent variable is a monthly employment dummy, which is equal to 1 if the individual is employed in a labour contract in that particular month. And the explanatory variables of interest are DII dummies. So whether the disability insurance increase is received in that particular month, or whether it's ever, the evers, or never, the nevers have received it. So here are some descriptive statistics they find. So the interesting things that they notice are that people who claim, so these are the evers, and here are the evers who are aged less than 55. The people who claim the increase, they started claiming on average a bit later. And that's because they noticed that after age 55, there's an acceleration into disability insurance, which they think is driven by the increase. So there's kind of a bunch of people for whom the time cost, the social stigma cost, whatever, is too high for 55% of their salary. But when it reaches 75%, they think, okay, I'm going to claim now. And that's why they reduce their sample to get rid of those people. And we can also see that there's some quite big differences between the evers and the nevers. So even before age 55, the nevers have an employment rate between 23 and 24%. And for the nevers, it never reaches higher than 5%. And then another thing that we can see is the discontinuity in employment rates before age 55 and after age 55 is much higher for the evers than the nevers. So this falls by 2.5%, which is maybe just the yearly effect of getting 1 year older, early retirement, that kind of stuff.
So what was never and ever?
So the nevers are the evers are the people who have claimed the disability insurance increase, and the nevers are the people who never apply for it.
Oh, I see. So, okay. So this is the whole sample, not only those applying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the people who claim the increase, the employment portion falls by 39%.
I still don't get it. How can a never have an age where they started claiming?
Well, it just started claiming disability insurance. So the ever and the never is about the increase.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
And so the people who do claim the increase, they have a much larger fall in employment once they hit 55, so 39%. So the main result that they present comes from a regression discontinuity model. So this model can be applied when there exists a cutoff point for a silent variable above and below which there's a really strong difference in treatment probability. So this is what's known as a fuzzy RD model. A sharp RD model is where the probability of treatment jumps from 0 to 1 when you cross this threshold. And a fuzzy one is where it jumps quite significantly, but not from 0 to 1. So the difference in outcomes up here is going to be a function of the difference in treatment. So the RD estimator beta is calculated by comparing average labour market probability before and after 55, and then scaling by the change in the mean portion of people who receive the disability insurance increase. And here we've got some kind of graphical justification for why they've used it. So the top line is the full unrestricted sample, and then the bottom is the people who started claiming before age 55. And so this is the jump in treatment, and then this is the jump in employment. So what they're trying to do essentially is explain this gap here as a function of this gap here. And here are the results that they found. So what they do is they looked at people who are aged plus minus 1 year around 55. And so for each individual, there will be 12 observations in their data set, 12 from when they're 54 for each month, and then 12 from when they're 55 for each month. And the reason they've done that is because of the self-selection effects we discussed earlier, they think that if they keep a small window, you're unlikely to change that much between a few months before your 55th birthday to a few months after. So that's what allows them to say that their results are not biased. So you can see here the probability of treatment is 50 percentage points higher for those who are 55 than those who are 54. The labour market participation rate is 0.5 percentage points lower, which gives us an estimated RD coefficient of -1%. So this translates to an 8% fall in employment in the sample, and then 36%, which is 20 as a portion of 55, divided by 8% gives an elasticity of 0.22. One thing that I haven't been able to understand, and some of you might not be able to understand either, is why this isn't negative. But they've just used all positive values in the paper, and I can't understand why, but it's the magnitude of the effect that we're worried about, because we know that it's negative. So this calculates only the local average treatment effect. So this tells us the impact of this increase in disability insurance for people who are aged 54. So it doesn't tell us how it affects someone who's 52, for example. So they know in 3 years' time they're going to get a huge pay rise. And it doesn't tell us how that affects their attachment to the labour market. And so they check their results for robustness using some placebo regressions on untreated groups, and they find that the coefficient is not statistically significant. So that convinces them that the regression is not spurious. So in conclusion, their results are largely in line with the existing literature, but they differ in that they focus on the generosity of the benefit rather than the entitlement. They discover there's an acceleration into disability insurance for people who are aged 55 and over. And once they control for this, they find that the income elasticity of disability insurance generosity on labour market participation is around 0.22, only for older and less employable workers. However, they stress that as this is the biggest age group, the fastest growing age group claiming disability insurance, that this is still quite a relevant result. However, as they have discounted people who are induced to claim by the increased generosity of the benefit, and that it's only a local average treatment effect, obviously they underestimate the full impact of the disability insurance increase on the total working population. However, they think that the result is important because it isolates the income effect only, which obviously has no kind of deadweight loss, and they stress that it's quite a significant effect, and so this should provide some food for thought to policymakers who might be quite tempted to use the substitution incentive argument to kind of cut the benefits of a group of people who are already in quite a weak income position in society. So thank you for listening. Any questions? No?
Go ahead.
I'll ask just at the beginning, when you mentioned the fact that there is no substitution effect, if you could just repeat that.
So there's no substitution effect because you're not forbidden from working, and the level of benefit does not reduce with your salary. So you get this benefit, and it doesn't matter if you're playing for Barcelona or whatever, they won't take anything away from you. So there's no substitution effect at all.
And I have a question about the paper. Do they say anything? They're not worried about these people just not claiming something they're entitled to, or they are,
Well, the thing is, because they didn't have data on who's been accepted and who's been rejected,
right?
They interviewed some people who do these assessments, and they say, yeah, we give it to everyone, but we don't know to what extent that's true.
Right.
So it could be that they're a bit more diligent in who gets it and who doesn't, or it could just be that people feel like, I'm not going to take from the taxpayer if I don't really need it, I don't know.
Okay, right.
Yeah, no, they don't really go into it that much.
Okay, thank you.